Leslie, it's very fun to see you in this context. The first time we hung out was not that long ago, and it was actually in person. Leslie and I are new same city friends. So while I wish we were hanging out in person right now, I'm very happy to have you on the show.
Yes, we had our little meet cute at
We
the
did.
coffee shop.
Thanks to
Yes, so
Joy.
thanks to Joy. We love Joy. Thanks for having me. I'm so stoked to be here.
So you wrote a book that is releasing into the world in the near future. And the book that you wrote was about your experience of having your husband of how many years were you all married at that point?
We were married 5.5 years.
5.5 years. To
Yeah.
use your words, I think, so people don't think I'm the one that's being insensitive. Your husband literally dropped dead. He dropped
Yes.
dead and on
He went
vacation.
poof. Went poof. If you if you want to make it even less sensitive, that's what I like to say. He vanished.
He
Yes.
vanished on
On
family vacation while you had young children, and literally in a matter of hours, your entire world turned upside down.
Yeah,
And you
so
wrote a book
rude.
about it. You wrote a book about it called You're So Strong and about letting go of your favorite compliment. And it is a book about grief and loss and life and performing grief. And it is so funny. Like, if this is not like a book that you're just kind of like, oh, I'm signing up for 300 pages of just like heavy, dense. The way that you talk about your experience is so real. It's so funny. It's so powerful. I'm so grateful that you wrote this book. And when I was thinking about this series on relationships, community, connection, and social health, I thought I want to have a conversation specifically about how we love others, how we show up as friends and community members for people who are experiencing capital T trauma and grief in their life, and also what you learned, like being loved by people through this journey. So, should we get going?
Oh my goodness, yes. I could talk about my community all day. I don't know if I would be here without them. We talked about
And
this a little bit when we met
yeah,
up, that
yeah.
that whole idea that it's not really the type of loss that makes recovery better or worse, but who is actually supporting you and whether you have space to talk about what's going on, whether you have people showing up for you, that's actually the measure of whether you survive. And so knowing that, I there's so many people to hug and so many thank you cards to send that I never wrote. And you don't have to write thank you cards, by the way, if something terrible happens. But this book
You
is
get an exemption from writing thank you cards. Praise God.
woo.
But let's actually tap into that a little bit because you did share, and I love social science and research, and you had shared a piece of research with me that I hadn't come across yet. Will you tell us exactly what that research showed?
Yes. Okay, there was a social psychologist named James Pennebaker. I don't know if I'm saying that right,
It's
but
better than peanut baker, so
hey,
we're gonna
that
go
is
with it.
better. He should change it if it is peanut baker, okay? He had a hypothesis that if there was trauma where there was a lot of social stigma, like suicide or sexual assault, that would lead to harder recovery for the person that is experiencing that trauma. And he went out and did like social research on this and found zero correlation between the type of trauma and the potential for recovery. So it turned out like the number one factor in recovery was whether or not a person had a family or a friend or some kind of emotional support group or someone to talk about and process with. And that blew my mind because I do think a lot of people ask me. One thing that people say a lot to grievers and to widows is, I don't know how you did it. How did you do it? How are you okay? And that study really showed me, like, I think this is a big reason why
Mm,
I'm okay.
yeah,
Because I had
yeah.
people showing up and I had people that I could process this loss with. It was huge.
Okay. That I literally have goosebumps. I've read that study and then I looked it up after you sent it to me. So it's not even new to me. And I'm still just like, this matters so much. So let's get I would, and listen, every grieving person is a unique person in the world. So I don't pretend that it's like how Leslie experienced love from her community is exactly how your friend who's experiencing grief or trauma might. But I'm just curious, even without it needing to be universally applicable, for you, what are a couple things that come to mind that when you look back and you were just in the depths of despair, in the pit of hell, your entire life has been turned upside down? What are some like specific moments that stick out to you where you go, oh, that felt like a lifeline to me?
Okay, so this is more the entire experience of having my sister live 5 houses down. And I know that you can connect with that, right? Because you live by all of your friends. A little jealous of that. I no longer live by my sister, but we did live on the same street for 6 years. My sister actually lived 5 houses down from me during this whole time period. She doesn't live by me anymore. And so I am very jealous of you, Liz, that you still live in such close proximity to your people because it really, I mean, she was my everything. We made
Yeah.
lots of jokes, calling us sister wives because her husband like killed spiders for me. He took out the trash. You know, he was another step in dad for my kids during that time. And then my sister, she fed me like almost every night. I feel like in the first year, I got a text inviting me to dinner, which was so huge because I don't know if you know this, but my sister's kind of a good cook. I have three sisters,
Mhm.
but one of them is a blogger, a food blogger. So I wasn't
She's
just
like a
getting,
big deal.
she's sort of a big deal. I wasn't just
Yeah.
getting invited over for, you know, nothing, grilled cheese sandwiches. Okay. This was like the best meal you've ever had every night of the week.
Like a
And
Tuesday night.
so, yeah, that definitely got me through it. Literally kept me and my children alive. But there were other
And
people, yeah.
these are the types of, just to double tap into this a little bit, and it's like, whatever. My audience is used to me evangelizing to them about proximity at this point. So here we go. But they were able to provide support to you that even the best, most committed, but still we have to have jobs and we have our own young kids. The level of support that they were able to provide to you was just quantifiably so significantly more than even the best, most committed sister who lives 45 minutes away from you or even 25 minutes away from you
Mm,
was able to do. And one of the things that I talk about in proximity is this idea of low lift, high impact. When you design your life to have proximity with people that you are in community and relationship with, support becomes much lower lift and is able
mm,
to create a higher impact. And so I think about this situation like your brother-in-law killing a spider for you. If you live 5 houses down, the investment that it takes to go kill a spider for your sister-in-law, let's just quantify it. Let's say that's an 8-minute investment. You walk down, you go in, you kill the spider, you probably laugh about the fact that you're so afraid of spiders, and then you leave. That's an 8-minute investment, right? The impact that it has, I imagine if you're somebody who's scared of spiders, I'm not, so I can't identify with this specific situation of
tears.
needing someone else to kill a spider for me. I imagine for somebody who's afraid of spiders, there's an immense emotional impact of going, somebody else stepped in and specifically and did something that my husband probably would have done for me had he
Yes.
not dropped it. High impact, but kind of low lift for your brother-in-law. Had he lived 25 minutes away from you, there's just no world in which you, first of all, would have even asked him
Asked.
to come
Yes.
kill
That's
a
what I was going to
spider. You
say. Yeah.
never would have asked.
Yeah.
And then there's a less likely chance that he would actually be able to make that happen. So I don't know
Yeah.
about that. So you all, like, it was this design choice that you made. And this brings me to my second point. You made a choice about how to design and prioritize your life long before you actually needed it in the way that you needed it in your season of grief and loss. So this wasn't, you guys didn't have a situation. I'm
Mm,
not saying this is wrong. Like this could be the right choice for somebody to go, my husband just died. I have 2 little kids. I'm going to go move close to my sister. But you already had that. You like had that built in. And it
mm,
almost to me feels like you kind of had this like insurance policy. Like you had built your life without even knowing it going like, how would I want my life to be structured if the worst possible thing imaginable happens? And then you benefited from it so immensely. You had a sister wife and a step-in husband
Yes.
in a way, in your
Yes.
deepest hour of need, in a way that you just wouldn't have if your life hadn't been designed that way.
Yes, and like you said, it wasn't something that I orchestrated. We didn't call it insurance. We didn't think the worst thing ever
Sure.
was going to happen
Yes.
to
Yes.
us. But
Yeah.
now I do think that way. Now I'm trying to get other people to
Mm,
move where I live, and I do think that way. So once the worst has happened to
yeah.
you, you're like, where would I want to live when the worst thing happens to me? And I was so blessed that I lived next to family
Mm,
that really took care of me. But what's interesting is that I
mm.
actually did orchestrate some proximity after Ryan died. I got a roommate that moved in with me,
Yes.
one of my
Let's talk about
close
that.
high school friends. And it's funny because she has a whole chapter in the book because our joke the whole time that she lived with me was that anytime something meaningful happened and she made me cry, I'd be like, "You're getting a chapter in my memoir." And so
Yeah.
then it was like anytime anything happened, we're like, "It's going in your chapter." And so when I went to go write the memoir, I was like, I don't know where to put the Lindsay chapter. That's her name. And I feel like I just kind of shoved her in there because
Shoved
I
it
was like,
in.
she she has to have a
I
chapter.
am making
And
good.
what's
I
interesting,
am making good on that.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I like a month after Ryan died, my family had mentioned getting a roommate. I had a basement that had a bathroom and a bedroom, and nobody was living down there. So even though they would have shared space with us, like kitchen and all that, they would have their own space
Mhm.
downstairs.
Mhm.
And I was like, absolutely not. I was thinking through college and awkward roommate stories and like those notes that get left in the kitchen and all of that. I'm like, I do not need something to manage right now. I'm
Anything else?
managing
Yes.
grief
Yeah.
and my children,
Yep.
and being a single mom and all that. But then Lindsay shows up, and she's was an old high school friend that is so funny. And she comes to my house and she's hanging out with my kids, and my sister Natalie's there, and she's like eyebrows up, and she's like, "Ask her, it could be her," because Lindsay was living in her sister's condo at the time, and she had just moved back in
Wow.
town. And I was like, you know what? She's probably the only one. She's so chill. And there was this shared
Mm.
humor between us. And so she moved
Mm.
in, and I told her when she moved in, I was like, "You're not going to stay here that long because I am going to find you someone to marry, and you're going to get out of here. I'm going to match make you." And I did. I found her somebody, and she was married 2 years later, but we lived together for 2 years.
Mm.
And,
Okay, hold on.
anyways,
Before you even talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah.
experience, I wanna double tap into this moment of asking her, because I think it's like you could be like, "Wow, it's so serendipitous that this friend from college that you shared humor with just shows up in your grief." Yes, that is lucky. That's a blessing. That's whatever it is. But then there was an action step and a risk that you took to identify, like, I think for the right person, inviting them to live with me. And I imagine there was like, that's a very vulnerable thing. To invite somebody to live with you is vulnerable no matter what, because it's just like you're going to see all of me. You're going to see the best, you're going to see the worst, you're going to see the mess, you're going to see the magic. But when you are in a season of like such deep grief, I imagine you feel like you're showing up a little bit less often with your best self and more with the mess. And so to invite somebody to witness that so closely is not a small that is not a small risk, and that was very vulnerable. Were
So
you, when your sister
vulnerable.
was like, ask her, were you just like, okay, yeah, or like what mental gymnastics
Okay.
did you have to do or to get through to like be brave enough to go, not only can I make the ask, but I can bear the idea of this part of myself being that known by somebody who isn't your sister or your best friend, you know?
I know. And someone I hadn't seen for a couple years. Okay. So I definitely did not think it all the way through. I think
Okay.
the timing was key. The timing was key for this moment because when you are at the beginning of grief, especially my grief, which was a sudden death, right? He went poof. So when you're at the beginning of that, you are pretty dang impulsive. And so there was
Okay.
even moments, you know, I wrote in the book where a couple months after I was just like ready to throw myself on any guy. I was not thinking through how that worked with my children, whether that was a good choice, you know, like whether that was safe, you know, like there's this impulsivity at the beginning. So if she
Yeah.
had turned up
Yeah.
6 months, a year after, I wouldn't have agreed, because at
Mm,
that point I knew kind of where I went to in my grief, and I was a little bit more embarrassed and hiding some of the
mm.
darker sides of it. So I think
So
that was the key
she
to it. I
caught you
just
before you
blindly
made any really bad decisions.
I know. And I asked her right in that moment. And so she's
Mhm.
there, you know, the first time she's seeing me, I'm sure she's like shell shocked by the whole situation. She sees my two little boys, 3 and 1 years old, and she's just like, sure, you know. So I felt maybe like she impulsively agreed as well. But what's
Okay.
funny is that
Uh-huh.
her and I now, whenever we see each other now, which is not as often, we both start crying because of how much that time period meant to us. And have you ever
Mm.
seen the movie Our Friend?
Mm-mm.
That would
I don't
be
think so.
so beneficial for you to watch with this series,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
her and I
Yeah.
watched that together and we were weeping. It's a real story of a man walking his wife through her cancer diagnosis, and they have two little girls,
Mm.
and their friend moves in during that time. And
Mm.
just how beneficial it was for him to, while he's like showing up for these kids and like getting through life and all that, to still have a buddy at the end of the day to
Mm.
kind of joke around
Mhm.
with. And so what I always like to say about Lindsay and about people showing up is that the practical is like incredibly profound in that time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Lindsay watching dumb shows with me at night was the most sacred part of my whole
Mm.
grieving experience, that she just was there, and we had a similar sense of humor, and that we were just laughing, and there was this bond. It wasn't like I was processing that much with Lindsay. There were definitely moments of
Yeah.
that, but it was just her presence. And
Yeah.
another thing that she did is she made smoothies in the mornings for my boys, and they started not waking me up. They would run down to the basement and wake her up, and I would come
Mm.
out mortified like, I'm so sorry that you didn't get to sleep in. And she was like, are you kidding me? I love this. And so I just think back on those smoothies and just those late
Mm.
night hangs, that I'm just so grateful, and I'm absolutely confident that that helped me get to where I am now, and being able to think about that year and not be completely traumatized and buckled
Yeah.
over remembering that year.
Right. Because there is like there can be after loss or grief almost like secondary trauma that gets created because it's like, okay, I have all of this grief and sorrow and I don't have support. I don't have a healthy way of dealing with it. So then in the midst of that, an addiction forms or some really core key relationships break because of some, different. And so then it's like, not only are you dealing with the hard thing, but then you're dealing with this like cascading hard events that were
Hmm.
kind of caused by the first hard thing. And so there is something to be said even for like, oh my gosh, and of course we can't know these things. They're unknowable. But like even thinking about what is the like pain, additional pain and trauma
Hmm.
that you or your kids didn't experience because she entered into your grief during that specific season. And I also just think it's so profound in all of my conversations that I've had with folks who have experienced grief or trauma and how they felt loved or supported or not through it. I don't know that I have ever heard somebody just be like, the thing that really saved me is I have this friend and she has a PhD in psychology and she's also a poet. And so I would process my pain with her. And then she would like on the spot, like write this beautiful sonnet that just felt like it perfectly encapsulated my pain, but it called me to a high. No, like that.
No.
It's not like, it's just not skill. It's not unique. It's not like you have some special spiritual gift. Like more often than not, it's like, can you watch Netflix and make smoothies? And
Yes.
like, if so, you actually have, you are very well suited to be somebody's support system. Like, that's not rocket science. You don't need to have some special spiritual gift to be with people in suffering. You actually just have to be next to them for the
Just
most part.
be there. Yes. And what was
Just be
interesting
there.
about Lindsay is that she didn't know Ryan. And I think that was helpful during that time. So there
Mm,
was so many different layers of support. I mean, I talk a lot about how important it was for me to talk with other widows, and that's
yeah.
support that I sought out. And
Yep.
there were widows that got on the phone with me. I just wanted to hear
Mm,
stories. And in
mm,
those spaces, I was able to dump out more dark thoughts than maybe I would have with Lindsay.
mm.
But also, what was so nice about Lindsay is that I wasn't carrying her grief about Ryan. So most
Right.
of my good
Right.
friends showed up really well too. They watched my kids, they dropped off food, they helped me go through Ryan's things. But it was hard being with those people
Yeah.
because they were hurting too. And so
Yeah.
you feel this like managing of people's grief. You worry that
Mhm.
you are going to make them have more pain when they see you have a moment that's
Yeah.
sadder, or when they see you moving on, and not really moving on, but like, living
Yeah.
on and getting married again, dating again. You get worried about how all of your decisions will affect them because you love them and they loved Ryan. So it was interesting with Lindsay. She was this sort of neutral space that really brought me a lot of peace during that time.
Oh, that is such a good point. It's even about the healing journey, how you can feel. I had a miscarriage. So we tried to get pregnant for about a year and then we got pregnant and then I ended up miscarrying. And it was so, I mean, I just like, I
Ugh.
wanted to be a mom maybe more than anything else. And so at this point, I'm thinking, will I ever get to be a mom? So I'm like dealing with the loss of this, our first pregnancy, but then also just the anxiety of like, I couldn't see the future that I would go on to have three healthy, happy babies. So it was a hard time. It was a hard time. And I remember making the really and I did immediately bring in my best friends. And I hadn't told people that I worked with, who were all also my employees. So that's like a different dynamic that I wasn't going to share that I had gotten pregnant and that I had lost this baby. And the reason that I didn't want to share it with my colleagues, I remember consciously thinking this and being like, am I a sociopath? Is like, because I was so sad. I was so sad. It was up until that point in my life, definitely one of the great griefs and losses that I had experienced. And I remember being like, but I want to be able to go to work and be sad. And I know I can be because I have my own office and I can shut the door and I can cry if I need to. I also want the freedom to not be
Hmm.
and to be happy and to laugh and to solve problems and to work on a creative project. And I felt this sense of, if everybody knows that I just went through this horrible thing, almost like this pressure that I was going to have to like perform
Yes.
grief in a specific way. And I was like, I would rather not. I would rather have complete agency over experiencing my full range of
Yes.
human emotions from 9 to 5. And therefore, I just don't even want anybody to know. And so I think that just when you were kind of talking about how even it wasn't even just your grief and sorrow being a burden to other people, but then the complexity of like, I don't know, what are people going to think if you are having a great day and you're like laughing and you don't want to talk about the loss? And like, are
Yes.
you going to feel judged or a sense of like, am I widowing right? Am I sad enough for this person who also loved him?
And that is really what I did a lot, was ask if I was widowing right.
Yeah.
I don't think I did as good a job as you at creating those spaces, except for Lindsay. So I think that was interesting. Like at my own
Mm,
house, I had that space. Thank
yeah.
goodness. that's that's really
Right.
why she was the only one that made sense to live there. But I
I mean,
was
also just to be clear, you can hide a miscarriage. You can't hide a dead husband.
That's
You don't
true.
really have a choice to like create a space where nobody knew that you had gone through
I
this.
know, but I do. When you were saying that, I thought of my friend Pam, she's talked on Vids for Wids, the platform that I have where widows
Mhm,
come and tell
mhm.
stories. And she was like a really high up exec at Nike. And she like made the choice of she wasn't going to wear the ring around her neck. She just wanted to be able to go to work and not
Mhm.
be a widow at work. And she was like, it
Mhm.
was my lifeline. Like I ran
Mhm.
back to work. And what's funny is that people will be like, "Oh, you started work too soon." And work was complicated
Mm.
for me because Ryan and I were business partners. So work was mixed in very,
Also shattered.
it
Yes.
still is
Yeah.
very mixed in with my grief. But she had that as her safe place, like
Yeah.
what you said. And she just, everyone on her team knew, she just went there to just dominate at her job, and that felt so good, and it was absolutely what she needed at that time.
And did she talk about how did she communicate that explicitly to her colleagues?
I think
Was
she
she like,
did. She
"Hey,
did
this is"
some
yeah.
prep, and then also she just said like the way that I presented and all of that was just like, we're not, this is going to be my place where I'm not, well, for a long time she was a caretaker too. So she's like, the place where I'm not the caretaker of my husband. It's the place where I am not a widow. It's the place where I am,
Right.
CEO, or no, she wasn't
Yep.
CEO, but she's dominating the place where she was doing
Yeah.
her job, the thing that she was good at.
Yeah.
I think it's hard though to manage your support at the beginning. So that's amazing that she was able to do that. I wish I was better at that. I think that a lot of time the griever is so, our brains are a bit broken at the beginning. And so that is why, other resources are helpful, like to find out from people a few years down the line, like what actually helped you? How could I
Yeah.
actually show up?
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful that she kind of knew in that moment, like, hey, this isn't landing great. I think I worried a lot about how something like that would affect people. And so kept it
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
a bit more. And also, I was afraid, you're afraid about when it stops. So you don't want all the floodgates, but then you're also
Mm.
like, oh, if I tell you to stop now when I don't need it, will it still be there in a year when I absolutely will need it? I think there was some fear
Let's
of that.
yeah. Can we talk about that? What did that look like for you with your closest people? Because this does feel like it's a pretty common thread with grief, is like there's the floodgate of support. There's like, we all know this happened. The food is coming. The meal trains are happening. The random flowers are getting dropped off on your doorstep. And then, life goes on and it becomes more in the rear view mirror for some people. Tell us about in your own journey, where did that moment happen where you experience like, oh, I'm still in it and I need my people and I might need my people even more acutely in some ways than I did then,
Hmm.
and like, but it's kind of been a long time, or like, I don't know if everybody else's this is as top of mind for them. Did you experience that like
Well,
dissonance at all?
my 1 year mark was spring of 2020. So, what was really interesting, I feel like the moment that you do need more support in year two. I think widows need more check ins in year two because that is when the big crowd kind of distances themselves. So, those that are close in proximity, that's where you really want to lean in. But for me,
Mm,
everybody was suddenly going through something hard. So, I already
right.
kind of knew that, when the next year came, April 2020, that I would be doing more on my own and not getting to
Mm,
use the widow card as often as I wanted to, not getting to play that. But I was not prepared for like everyone else struggling and
right.
drowning around me, like complaining about having their kids all the time. And I'm like, I'm still here. I'm still drowning. That was an extra insult to injury for me. But even now, 7 years, almost 7 years later, I still have hard moments. And now that I am a little bit further from the shock of all of it, I do try to let my close community
Mm,
know. I really, it really is like the lead up to the anniversary day. Ryan's
mm,
birthday is in March. So we're just about to head into my really
yeah.
crappy season right when I'm promoting a book. It's just great timing. But that's
So fun.
that's usually the time period where I just don't feel well. I have a lot of anxiety. I'm snappier. You know, most of the year people can bring up a Ryan story and I light up. And then this time of year they bring it up and I just get mad that those are the only stories, or that I've already heard that one and I want more. And
Yeah.
I get mad when
Yeah.
the videos end. I start getting just a little bit more in my feels this time of year. So I definitely loop in more of my friends now, knowing that like, hey, you got to have extra grace for me in March and
Yeah.
April. And I have amazing friends who understand. And a lot of them, they get sad around this time of year too. So, because
Mm,
we all are
yeah.
grieving, Ryan. And that was something that I learned later too. At the beginning, it feels like I'm the most important. I'm the first place griever. I'm the one
Mhm.
most deserving of all the tears and sadness. And then as time goes on, you just see how isolating that is. You're isolating yourself by
Mm,
not allowing yourself to combine grief with other people because they also miss Ryan. They're also sad about Ryan. So that's been an interesting thing to learn as time has gone on. So I'm not the only one that's sad.
mm, yeah. It's so good. I just want to double tap into widows need more support in year two. That just feels
Yeah.
like such a, we can just say it. Just like, hey, general rule, if your friends experience a huge loss, and it's probably not even, unique to specifically widows, but just like that general framework of like just getting it in our heads that it's like grief is a long journey, and having a framework for being like, I'm showing up now. I'm really going to show up a year from now.
Yes.
And I just think that's a really powerful, like kind of just general rule for us to know. Um, okay, I have two questions. One, okay, what order do I want to go in? I know you don't want to be like throwing anybody under the bus or seeming like an ungrateful wench or a negative Nancy. Okay, so, but I am curious. Sometimes we learn by hearing what went well. Your
Hmm.
sister, Lindsay. I am curious, and we don't need to name names here, okay? But were there any moments that you, or generalizations that you can look back on and go, "Oh, that was not helpful," or that
Oh,
was
yeah,
really
for
hurtful,"
sure.
or like, can we talk? Let's talk about let's take the plucking up angle of like, how do we pluck up when our friends are in
Mm,
grief, and maybe you can help us so that we have a lower likelihood of doing that in the future.
okay, well, the first one is the name of the book. You're so
Okay.
strong. You are the strongest person I know. Like, I got a lot of that after, and I think it comes from a good place. But all that it says to you is, I have to be so strong. That's what I heard. Like, okay, this is what
Yeah.
you need from me. What was funny is that people said it before I even did
Mm.
anything. Before I even did a thing, I was getting messages about how strong I was. So I felt like that was being thrown at me almost
Put on
immediately. And
you.
yeah, almost immediately. And I at the
And like,
time
and then
I
I guess
wasn't
what's the opposite of that is you're so weak. Like, and
just
it
don't.
doesn't, like, no one wants to hear that. So I could see my imagination going to the same place where it's like, well, what would it even look like for me to not be getting that affirmation? What are those behaviors? And then like, are those okay? Clearly people don't want to see or interact with that. That's complex. I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe you don't need to give a big compliment at the beginning. You need to be more sitting in the crappy and be like, this is terrible. This is
Mm.
terrible. But you look hot. Like there's no like compliment that's gonna make the terrible better. I'm like, you are
I don't know. I
amazing,
always
but
love
this
to
is
hear
bad.
that I'm looking
Okay,
good.
okay. I'm sure if the worst thing happened to you, you would still look so hot, Liz. but but I think there's something about just sitting in the terrible with
Mm.
somebody that is a bit more helpful than that. I'm
Which
trying to think of
which
something
again,
else.
if we're talking just about like skills, that doesn't require a lot of skills. Like
No.
coming up with really great compliments or encouraging words to say, I can see some people being like, well, it's just not my forte. Pretty much anybody can sit next to you and go, this sucks.
Yeah.
This blows so
Exactly.
hard. I am
Exactly.
so sorry. Like that require low skill. Just presence
Yeah.
and honesty. Because it's like, unless you're a sociopath and you're not like feeling the sadness to some degree with or alongside of somebody, that doesn't take a lot to be able to do that. But yet, the power of that, it just feels so consistent that that is what feels most meaningful to people.
Yeah, I think I remember most just the texts that were like just the F word. I don't know. It's just the people that were just like, whoa, this is a terrible thing that just happened. And so what was interesting is, yeah, the more simple, the more profound it felt. Again, it's interesting how it doesn't require skill, like you said.
Okay, so no compliments in the beginning. Can we just
No
not with the compliments?
compliments. Okay, the other one that
No
I got that
compliments.
was a bit awkward was someone came up at church. And this was weird because it was like they were giving a prophecy, but this can happen when it's not a
Mm.
prophecy sort of moment. But they came up and they said, I just saw a vision of you and you were married again and you had other kids and you were running with butterflies in a field, which is really funny because I live out in a big field now. But that was the worst thing I could have ever heard right after my husband died. I did not want to think that anything would ever be good again. I didn't want to hear that I would
Mm.
not be
Mhm.
there would be a day that came that I would not be sad about Ryan because my sadness about Ryan
Mm.
connected me to him. It showed my love for him. And so when someone said
Mm.
that, so that could look like someone just talking like there's sometimes people will say like at least you can get married again, at least your kids are young so that if you did get married again they could accept that person as a dad. And, some of those might be true that I was young and maybe it was easier for me to date again. And I did get married again and I did have a kid again. And guess what? Like my kids were young and maybe that blended family stuff, though it's still complicated, went easier for me. But that is the least helpful thing you could say to a widow. Obviously, throw at least out of your vocabulary. We don't need that.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Oh,
also
that's good.
the,
Okay.
yeah,
No
no, at
compliments.
least.
No
No,
compliments.
at least.
No compliments. No dropping off after the crowds have left, and no
Mm,
at least.
love that.
Just no. Don't put it. No at least. Okay. I do have a question. If those things, not the at least, but the like, you will be okay someday, if those were coming from another widow who had walked this road, would
Hmm.
that have been received differently? Or did
I think
you didn't want anybody to tell you that
this
there
is a
was,
personality type. This is a personality type because
okay.
I right when Ryan died, I'm like doom scrolling online. I'm taking in every widow story. I want to know what every widow has done ever that has gone through this. I want to feel less alone. But I had a very hard
Yeah.
time when my feed showed me remarried widows they just looked so
Mm.
happy. I needed to see that. I was looking for widows that stayed sad forever. And so that was interesting because there was a point where the sadness
That
got
is,
old.
yeah.
And what's interesting is that but at that time, at the beginning, I wanted to know that maybe not that like was depressed forever or stuck in sadness, but that Ryan would always be a part of my story. So I was really drawn to widows that
Mm.
maybe if they got married again, the other person, they were still telling the other person's story. That was really
Mhm.
compelling to me. And I think that's just because Ryan was my best friend and I don't want him to be forgotten. And I want
Yeah.
it mean like for his sake, whether he knows or not what I'm doing. He probably doesn't even know.
Right.
But I don't know how it all works. But I just feel like as his friend, I'm like, I will not let your legacy go. Your kids will know who
Mm.
you are, where they came from.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
there's that piece of it for me. But what's interesting is that a lot of widows, like newer widows, will talk to me and be like, your story gives me hope because there are some people that
Mm.
are more stuck in a complicated grief that is drowning them where they're not able to function. And so I do think there's a need for hope. And maybe my community, coming back to that, kind of gave me space so that I could function. They helped with my kids, they fed
Mhm.
me so that I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
function and kind of get through the days, and so that I was able to have hope. But yeah, I never wanted to not be sad. So I like to say like I'll
Mm.
forever be sad. But that doesn't mean that it's not good too, right? It doesn't mean we're not holding both
Yeah.
realities.
That's so good. Okay, so no at least, no compliments,
Yes.
no dropping off, and let's be discerning about whether or
Hmm.
not we share our own stories of hope. That's kind of what I'm taking away from that answer is
Hmm.
not like it's not as clearly like don't ever say at least. That feels very black and white to me. This feels a little bit more. I wonder if there's an opportunity for somebody who's on the other side of that grief then to just lead with curiosity and
Hmm.
kind of be like, do you feel like you would have received that from another widow who was, let's say, 10 years down the road and doing well
Yeah.
for kind of being like, how can I serve you in this? Like, what, and giving you the opportunity to be like guiding that a little bit? Or is that too much to put on a
I found
grieving
it
person?
beneficial when someone would always hold the tension of both realities. So
Mm,
someone could say something good and beautiful. Like maybe they'd say, like, Leslie, there could be another love story out there for you, but that doesn't mean you'll stop being sad about Ryan. So that was helpful to me.
mm,
So I think that
mm-hmm.
people should temper their at least with the complicated reality that it's not black and white,
Yeah,
that we're not trying to tie a bow around this story. We're not trying to get
yeah,
the big message from this mess or the purpose from this pain. We're not trying to get to some finish line, that it's okay if it stays a little messy. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the beautiful redemptive things that happen.
sure. Yeah. I kind of feel like maybe I have a general rule that the purpose and the pain thing is so real and it's so helpful. And I think in some ways it's very true. And it can only be talked about by the person who found purpose in
Mm,
their pain. Like
yeah.
you can't suggest that other people are going to find purpose in their pain or hope that they do or say that it's going to happen. I generally feel like if we're going to put pain and purpose together, that has to be
Mm,
coming out of the mouth of the person who experienced the pain and then found deep purpose in it. But like
yes.
not something that can be put on them. Does that feel like a helpful rule? Can you
Yes.
tell I
Yes.
really like
My thing,
rules when it
I
comes to
love this. I know
relationships?
we're creating the rule book. Okay. My thing with the purpose and the pain is that absolutely you will create meaning from your loss and purpose will come out of it. But that doesn't mean that it's worth it. Right? It's the
Oh,
everything happens
yeah.
for a reason thought that makes that unhelpful. So yes, there's purpose from pain, but is the pain worth it? Absolutely not. The pain happened and it's terrible. The purpose doesn't make it worth it. So that helped me because I was worried if I wrote anything, people would be like, "Oh, this is so good that that Ryan almost had to die for something like this to happen." Right? That's where my brain went.
Oh,
This terrible thing had to happen. And
yes.
that's like my storytelling
Totally.
brain. It's like my movie writing brain. Your protagonist has to be
Right.
an orphan in order to overcome, right? The parents have to be dead for something
Yes.
interesting, So it doesn't mean that had that, like, it was worth it that happened, and that's why I get to live out my great calling and destiny, right? It was never part of the plan for Ryan to die. That's how I feel. It's bad
Yeah.
that it happened.
Totally.
It's okay that there's
Yep.
purpose coming from it. That's my little
But
speech
oh,
about that.
that's so no, I that was so helpful. I think I would feel and I have before in my life been like sometimes even when I like pray
Hmm.
for myself and kind of just like, oh, I want more wisdom, I want more discernment, I want more peace, I want more patience and I do find myself being like but I don't want it so bad that I want something bad to happen to me so
Yeah,
I can get it.
I
And
don't
being
want it
like
that bad.
very clear with God of being like, I'm okay being mediocre. I would rather be mediocre and like not have my kid die than have my kid die and
Oh my
then
God.
have some sort of well of like discernment and peace. And so
Yeah.
I love that I think that's a very real emotion that it is just like, I don't think anybody who's ever gone through the type of loss that you have would look back on it and say the purpose that came out of it. Yes, I would choose. I would
No,
choose for that to have happened
no.
if in hindsight I knew everything that was going to come out of it. It's like, no, you've been handed a giant shit sandwich.
Yes.
And out of that shit sandwich, there could be good, beautiful, right things that emerge. Also, it was a shit sandwich that you would
Exactly.
have rather not been served.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's it. That is it.
I could keep going. I have another podcast. I should probably stop, but I want to ask you one more question, even though it's probably going to make me late for my next interview.
Oh
Is
no.
there
Okay.
anything that you can think of, in hindsight, if you could go back to any point in your grief journey and share one thing with the people that loved you and share one thing with yourself, what comes to mind for you?
I would tell myself to take a nap, to go easy on myself about doing grief well, right? To just phone it in a little bit more. Hello. That's what I would yell at myself. I would tell my family, I did tell them this and my community, but I waited a long time to just ask, how are you doing? And to acknowledge their
Mm,
pain and acknowledge
mm,
their grief. So that's kind of how I would go back and do it. And
hmm.
for all the people that didn't get thank you cards, this book is really a giant thank you card for those people that showed up and propped me up and kept me going.
Hmm. Well, speaking of thank you for being here.
Oh,
Thank you
you're welcome.
for the enormous work, which, we talked about before. It wasn't a huge amount of work for you. And also just acknowledging like the lifeline that even writing this book, like, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm putting words in your mouth, but it seems like you wrote this for others. And in the process of it, it really like served you. Your art served you also in your grief. So I want
Oh,
to say
yeah,
thank you for
absolutely.
the impact that it'll have on other people, and good for you for engaging, the enormous amount of work that it took to bring this into the world so you can be a
Thank you.
healthier, more whole person for yourself and for the world and for your kids, and also in the process benefit so many other people.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's hang out soon.
This was fun. What a blast. Okay, you're on to the
Let's do it
next.
again.